Welcome. Take a deep breath and let yourself drift backward in time. Far away from the present day, to a place where the wind always smelled faintly of salt, sweat, and smoke. To the shores of the 17th century Caribbean, a tangled web of islands that glittered like emeralds, each one touched by sun, storm, and the echo of cannon fire. Tonight, you and I are going to wander slowly, calmly, through the haze of that age, not the Hollywood version of pirates, but the real world they inhabited. A world that was loud and dirty, beautiful and brutal, all at once. We'll visit a notorious pirate port where survival was never guaranteed. We'll follow the trail of a woman who carved her name into outlaw legend. We'll explore tales of cursed treasure and hidden maps, and then rise to the upper echelons of powerware, powdered wigs, and plantations. Masked a different kind of ruthlessness. Each part of our journey is a window into a forgotten world, and as you listen, you may begin to feel the rhythm of old tides and wooden decks beneath your feet. But don't worry, you're safe here. There are no storms tonight, no cutlasses drawn. Just the gentle hum of history, slowly unfolding. So lie back, let your breath settle, and imagine yourself in Port Royal, Jamaica. In the year 1682. It is dawn. The sea is still, for now. The sky is brushed with thin streaks of orange and lavender. If you're lucky, there are no rats in your boots. If you're less fortunate, you'll notice them only after you've begun to dress. And across the harbor, wooden ships, some stolen, some sanction-dressed. Awkwardly in the shifting tide, their sails limp, their hulls scarred. A raucous, festering, thrilling place where taverns outnumbered churches 5-1. Where gold changed hands faster than water, and where a man might be king at midnight and dead by dawn. And boot thick with refuse. And, after the rains, nearly impassable. Chickens dart between human feet. Pigs half-feral root through heaps of waste. The smell is constant. Rotting food, unwashed flesh, the sweet temps of molasses, and something else. Something that clings to everything, sewage, maybe. Or worse. You rise from a cot that sags like a stretched-out hammock in a room that stinks of mildew and last night's rum. This is Port Royal, Jamaica, once called the wickedest city on earth. It's not just a place where pirates pass through, it was a home for them. Men drink fast, yell louder, and deal in coin and threats. It smells like pine tar and blood. Best keep your eyes down. Too much eye contact, and you might find yourself pulled into a quarrel that ends in blades or bottles. The streets, no honor. If you fall, expect a boot to the ribs. If you stray too far from your letter of marque, if your piracy becomes too bold, this is where you end up. If you win, you may not live long enough to brag about it. Rain barrels are safer than wells, but even then, illness waits. You step outside, blinking in the new light. The streets here are not paved with stone. Their packed dirt, churned by hoof water, is a precious thing here, and rarely clean. Sturdy, worn smooth by time and use. The noose swings slightly in the wind, like a reminder. A silent warning. Just slop buckets tossed from windows and gutters that overflow in the rainy season. He was, by local standards, considered careful. The most dangerous thing you'll face today isn't a sword, but a sip from the wrong cup. And if you're not careful, it consumes. The desperate, the adventurous, the damned. They come for gold, for freedom, for a taste of something wild. Mosquitoes whine at your ear, already seeking blood. Disease, at any given moment, fever lurks. Yellow fever, dysentery, typhus, take your pick. They open early, and they close late, if at all. Torches flicker. Music begins rough, uneven tunes played on battered fiddles and drums. Laughter echoes, but it's sharp-edged. There's always tension. A fight, a betrayal. A drunken boast taken too far. No anesthesia. Amputations are done by saw, and the pain is legendary. Infection is almost guaranteed. Most men fear the surgeon more than the blade that put them there. There's no proper sewage, no system to speak of. You can hear coughing around every corner dry. Racking sounds that come from men barely more than bones, their skin flushed with fever. No one flinches, it's just part of life here. The taverns. By mid-morning, the taverns are already busy. Inside, the wooden beams sweat rum. Tables are sticky. Fights here are frequent, quick, and messy. There's no code. And if you kill someone in the wrong company, well, the town has a gallows, and it's never empty for long. The gallows at the edge of the harbor stands a raised wooden platform. Port Royal is ruled by the English crown, at least in name. And while the governor tolerates privateers, there are limits. Sometimes bodies are left hanging as a deterrent. Other times, they're gibbeted locked in iron cages and suspended above the sea, left for birds and the sun. The real punishment isn't death. It's being forgotten. Unclaimed, unnamed. Food for time and tide. Medical help? You might think help lies in medicine. You'd be mistaken. The town's surgeons are as likely to be drunk as the pirates they treat. There are no sterilized tools. They say one surgeon in town drank 2 bottles of rum a day, stitched wounds with fishing line, and used the same rag for all his tools. Nightfall, as the sun lowers, the air grows thick with heat. The city never really sleeps. It roils, it sways. To live here is to balance on the edge of a knife, every hour a gamble, every day borrowed time, and still, they come. But for you, dear listener, this day in Port Royal is done, and you've survived just barely. The sea has always made room for outliers, for those who don't fit neatly into the quiet corners of polite society. And in the 18th century, aboard the decks of rogue ships sailing the Caribbean, one such outlier made herself known. Not with cannon or cutlass, but with stubborn defiance, sharp wit, and a heart that refused to obey. Her name was Anne Bonny. She was not the first woman to set foot on a pirate ship, and she certainly wasn't the last. But in her short, turbulent life, Anne Bonny etched a legacy that outlived the tides. And like so many figures of the golden age of piracy, the line between fact and legend slowly blurred with every retelling. By many accounts, she was headstrong, temperamental, and fiercely independent. Whether or not that story is true, her reputation for defiance was well known even then. So, let us take our time and follow her story. Softly, origins. A scandalous beginning. Anne Bonny was born around the year 1700, possibly in County Cork, Ireland. Here, the lines between outlaws and colonists were blurred, and began working for the colonial governor, Woodes Rogers, informing on his former comrades. Here, Anne was no longer the daughter of a gentleman. She was free to remake herself. She was the illegitimate child of a wealthy lawyer, William Cormac, and his maid, Mary Brennan. The scandal this caused was considerable. To escape the public shame, her father packed up the household and sailed for the New World. Settling in the colony of South Carolina, his name would not strike terror across continents, but he was clever, flamboyant, and utterly charmed by Anne Bonny. The two became lovers, scandalously and publicly. The three of them sailed through the Caribbean, attacking small vessels and evading capture. There, young Anne grew up in relative comfort. Her father prospered as a merchant and landowner. But Anne did not grow up gentle. They targeted merchant sloops and fishing vessels, often taking supplies rather than treasure. Anne disguised herself as a man when needed, but didn't always bother. She fought openly, dressed in trousers, wore pistols at her hip, and proved herself again and again in battle. And with that, Anne turned her back on the plantation life and the expectations of respectable society. It's said, perhaps with some exaggeration, that she once beat a man near to death for insulting her. When most of the men were too drunk to fight, it was Anne and Mary who stood their ground, firing pistols and swinging sabers. Her father had grand hopes for her, but Anne had plans of her own. But no one came. love, and defiance. The marriage that changed everything. Anne's last words to him, according to legend, were chillingly detached. In her late teens, Anne fell in love with a penniless sailor and small-time pirate named James Bonny. Her father disapproved fiercely. He disowned her. She and James moved to Nassau, a pirate haven in the Bahamas, sometimes called the Republic of Pirates. What is clear is that she did not flinch from violence when it came. She fought during raids. She defended her ship. She may have killed, though no official records confirm this. The sentence was postponed. Mary Read died in prison of fever, most likely. But Anne vanished from the record. But James Bonny disappointed her. Rather than diving headfirst into pirate life, he accepted a pardon. Anne grew restless. And then she met Calico Jack Rackham. Others believe she escaped, changed her name, and lived out her life quietly, far from the sea. A symbol of rebellion, of freedom seized in defiance of convention. A life at sea. John Calico Jack Rackham was no fearsome warlord. The fight was brief. Calico Jack and most of the crew were too deep in their cups to resist. Together, they stole a sloop, assembled a crew, and took to the seas. There was another woman aboard too, Mary Ridolso, disguised, also formidable. Their ship was no great galleon. 'Twas swift and light, better for darting than for fighting head-on. And while their exploits were modest, their presence, the image of two women pirates standing shoulder-to-shoulder with their male crew, was nothing short of extraordinary. Personality and perception. Anne Bonny was not a woman easily defined. Some accounts claim she was ruthless. Others suggest she was more calculating, careful even. One report, perhaps apocryphal, describes her fury at the male crew during their final battle. She reportedly shouted at the cowering men, "If there's a man among thee, come up and fight like the man thee are to be." Capture and trial. In 1720, their ship was finally caught by a British privateer under Captain Jonathan Barnett. Anne and Mary fought bitterly, but they were overwhelmed. In the days that followed, they were taken to Spanish Town, Jamaica, and tried for piracy. All were found guilty and sentenced to hang. Calico Jack was executed quickly. If you had fought like a man, you needn't have been hanged like a dog. But Anne and Mary pleaded their bellies. They were both pregnant. Under English law, a woman carrying a child could not be executed until after giving birth. There is no official record of her execution, no confirmed grave. Some say her father, still wealthy, intervened and secured her release. Whatever the truth, Anne Bonny's legacy lived on, part myth, part reality. A whisper in the wind. Today, her name endures, not because of riches gained or ships commanded, but because she dared to live outside the bounds. In a world where women were expected to serve quietly, Anne Bonny carved a loud, jagged path across history. Now, we leave the world of crashing waves and dueling cutlasses and enter something quieter, more elusive. A mystery that lingers not in cannon smoke, but in whispers. For over 3 centuries, seekers have scoured hidden coves and lonely islands, chasing a legend that refuses to die. The legend of Captain William Kidd, and the treasure he may or may not have buried before the noose tightened around his neck. So lie back, close your eyes, and imagine this: a narrow beach at dawn, damp sand underfoot, the gentle lapping of the tide. You're holding a faded map, edges curled, ink blurred by age. A red X marks a patch of earth, and beneath it, the promise of gold. Or perhaps, nothing at all. Who was Captain Kidd? William Kidd was born in Scotland around 1654. Unlike many pirates, he began his career not as an outlaw, but as a legitimate sailor and privateer. He was well-connected, respectable, even wealthy at one point. He married into a good family in New York, owned property, and held a reputation for discipline and loyalty. What followed was a journey marked by frustration, mutiny, and slow ruin. In 1695, Kidd received a royal commission from the English crown. His task, to hunt pirates in the Indian Ocean and seize any French ships he might find. It was a coveted, prestigious appointment. He was to be the Crown's agent, a gentleman privateer. He set sail aboard the Adventure galley, armed with 34 guns and a crew of hardened men. His crew, growing restless, began to grumble. Their pay depended on plunder and Kidd had nothing to offer them. The turning point Kidd's voyage proved difficult. Supplies ran low. Storms battered his ship. Canned, he struggled to find any legal prizes. Perhaps on Gardiner's Island off Long Island, or further north along the coast of Nova Scotia. Maybe in the sands of Delaware Bay or the coves of the Caribbean. Then, off the coast of India, he made a choice. And hanged in 1701. And afterward, his body was tarred and hung in a cage over the water, a warning to others. He was no longer seen as a crown agent, but as a pirate. He attacked an Armenian merchant ship, the Quedagh merchant, which, though captained by an Englishman, carried French papers. That made it a legal target. In theory, Kidd took the ship and its cargo gold, silk, spices, but news traveled. And by the time Kidd returned to the Americas, the political winds had shifted. Names of coves changed. Kidd's Cove, Pirates Bay. The legend took root. A hunted man. The burying of treasure, but that was only a fraction of his rumored fortune. Others thought it lay buried in the mudflats of Connecticut. Even Oak Island, in Nova Scotia, home to one of the most famous treasure digs in history, has been linked to Kidd's name. Here, the legend begins. As the noose of British justice tightened, Kidd was said to have buried his treasure somewhere along the eastern seaboard of North America. The soul, trapped, would then guard the hoard forever. Some claimed small caches of coins, odd trinkets, but never anything that matched the scale of Kidd's supposed hoard. The idea was simple. Hide the treasure, return later, or offer it in exchange for a pardon. In 1699, Kidd surrendered himself in Boston, expecting clemency. Instead, he was arrested, sent to London, and imprisoned for over a year. That any who sought it would suffer misfortune or madness. It speaks to the human urge to dig, to uncover, to believe that mystery still exists. Stories told of ghostly figures standing guard, of strange lights flickering at night, of compasses spinning wildly when brought near. Eventually, he was tried, convicted. They strung him up on the banks of the Thames. The first rope snapped a grim omen. The second held, just out of reach. But the treasure? It was never officially recovered. The search begins. Let us drift again, this time to the high courts and fine tables of the West Indies. Almost immediately, rumors spread. There were maps, some real, some forged. There were sightings, testimonies, mysterious carvings in stone. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, treasure hunters dug along the coasts of New England and the Caribbean. Gardiner's Island remains the most tantalizing clue. Historical records confirm that Kidd left a cache, their gold, jewels, and bolts of silk, which was later recovered by colonial officials. What of the rest? Some believed it was hidden beneath Liberty Island, where the Statue of Liberty now stands. And yet, nothing definitive has ever been found. Symbols and ghosts. Over time, the tale took on a spectral quality. It was said that the treasure was cursed, at that Kidd, sensing betrayal and doom, had placed a spell over it. Some tales claimed that Kidd had killed a member of his crew during the burial, his blood, a binding force to ensure secrecy. It's the kind of legend that grows with the telling, half folklore, half fever dream. The real treasure. What keeps this story alive isn't just gold. That's the idea of it. Buried treasure is a metaphor. A longing for something hidden just beneath the surface of life. Captain Kidd may or may not have buried a fortune. But he certainly buried a myth wand that generations have unearthed, polished, and passed on. And in that way, he succeeded. His name lives on not as a failed privateer, but as the keeper of something eternal. The promise of hidden wonder. So the next time you walk a beach at dusk, and your foot strikes something hard beneath the sand, you may wonder, if only for a moment, if you found a piece of that legend. And with that gentle thought, where rum flowed and power wore a powdered wig. As the salty air softens and the rattle of sails fades behind us, we now step into cooler shade, into high-ceilinged chambers of wood and stone, where candles flicker and men in silk stockings talk of law, trade, and empire. This is not the lawless world of pirates and gibbets. This is the other side of Caribbean life during the age of sail, the polished world of colonial governors, the men charged with keeping order in lands perpetually on the edge of chaos. They were appointed by kings and queens, but ruled over sugar-soaked colonies like little monarchs of their own. They dined on fine china while their ports teemed with smugglers. They spoke of law while pockets were lined with bribes. And they danced the delicate waltz of power, surrounded by rum, rebellion, and the unrelenting tropical sun. So now, picture yourself seated in the shade of a governor's veranda, a gentle breeze stirring the lace at your wrist. The stakes were high: sugar plantations, gold shipments, naval bases, and the crucial trade winds that determined global commerce. You sip tea or, perhaps, something stronger. Listen to the soft creak of palm fronds in the wind as we step into their world. The Caribbean as a chessboard. By the 17th and 18th centuries, the Caribbean was more than a paradise of palm trees and hidden coves. It was a political battlefield, one shaped not by armies alone, but by treaties, ships, and trade. Servants moved quietly across polished floors, carrying trays of fruit, silver, or steaming bowls of punch. Oil paintings of monarchs stared down from the walls. Maps of the world, some wildly inaccurate, hung proudly in every study. France, England, Spain, the Dutch Republic all jostled for control of the islands, their governors acting as both administrators and frontier diplomats. To be a governor here was to be many things: soldier, statesman, judge, tax collector, and sometimes opportunist. He held audiences in rooms that smelled of wax, parchment, and pipe smoke. His voice was measured, his words carefully chosen. He ruled by law, but also by favor. One day, you might be hosting a lavish dinner for visiting dignitaries. The next, you might be plotting how to quiet a rebellion or deciding which pirate to pardon and which to hang. Life in the governor's residence. Most governors resided in grand homes perched above the port townsmen, made of coral limestone or imported brick, surrounded by gardens of hibiscus, oleander, and tamarind. Smuggling was rampant. Piracy, when directed at rival empires, was quietly tolerated. Plantation owners, merchants, and military officers all held influence, and maintaining power often meant pleasing them. Inside, the air was kept cool with thick shutters and wide verandas. The furniture was heavy and imported mahogany from the colonies, carved oak from London. He arrived with soldiers and ambition, determined to suppress piracy. And many a governor relied on a web of tavern keepers, informants, and distillers to keep ahead of unrest. Reports exist of governors becoming intoxicated during official functions, slurring commands, or falling asleep mid-sentence. But here, two appearances mattered more than purity. A governor's charm could smooth over 100 indiscretions. Rogers governed with a firm hand, but also with shrewd pragmatism, using former pirates to police their own. The governor dressed the part: powdered wigs, silk waistcoats, embroidered cuffs, and rumors of mutiny swirled. Rogers once wrote that he was eaten up with care and sickness, a phrase that captures the weariness behind the fine wig. And always, just beyond the iron gates, the smell of rum, salt, and gunpowder drifted in from the sea. The governors knew this. They regulated the trade. Some profited from it. Few spoke against it. Politics and power. The balance of order and profit. Colonial governance was rarely clean. Though sent to enforce royal law, governors quickly learned the value of compromise. A clever governor knew when to turn a blind eye and when to strike with force. One example is Governor Woodes Rogers of the Bahamas, former privateer himself. Sent by the British Crown in 1718 to bring order to Nassau, he offered pardons to some men like Benjamin Hornigold and hunted down others like Charles Vane. But his rule was not easy. Supplies were scarce. Salaries went unpaid. The diplomatic elixir. Outside, the torches flicker. A ship's bell tolls in the harbor, and the warm wind carries both music and secrets through the shuttered halls. No tale of Caribbean governors is complete without mentioning rum, the lifeblood of both celebration and negotiation. Meetings began with it. Treaties were toasted with it. Rum was both currency and comfort, traded in barrels and measured in favors. A governor entertaining French officers might offer a carefully aged cask from Barbados, while brokering quiet promises behind fans and folded napkins. Taverns were not just dens of debauchery, they were information hubs. Of course, too much rum blurred the lines between diplomacy and indulgence, slavery and the silent foundations. Beneath all the ceremony, all the powdered splendor and political posturing, lay the brutal, unspoken engine of the colonies. Enslaved labor, sugar plantations, rum distilleries, dockyards all thrived on the backs of enslaved Africans brought across the Atlantic in horrific numbers. The official records are filled with transactions, manifests, auctions, punishment saw, written in the detached tone of bureaucracy. And while balls were held in brightly lit halls, thousands labored in cane fields under a blazing sun, enduring a system too vast and cruel to be seen as anything but normal at the time. The governor's silence was complicity. And though they rarely wielded whips themselves, they set the policies that allowed others to do so with impunity. Legacy, masks of order in a chaotic world. The colonial governors of the West Indies have largely faded from memory, overshadowed by the pirates they pursued and the empires they served. But they were real, complex, at once powerful and precarious. They held their posts at the crossroads of ambition, diplomacy, corruption, and survival. Some believed in the rule of law, others in the rule of gold. Most simply tried to hold the colony together, one day at a time. And so we leave them now, seated at their long dining tables, quills in hand, squinting over ledgers and royal decrees. And now we return. The waves quiet, the sails fall still, and the distant silhouettes of ships and islands begin to fade into the mist of memory. Tonight, you've wandered far from the filth and fury of Port Royal's crowded alleys, to the fiery defiance of Anne Bonny upon a creaking deck, to the ever-elusive whispers of Captain Kidd's treasure, and finally, into the lacquered halls of colonial governors, half-survivors of empire. The Caribbean in the 17th and 18th centuries was not one place or one experience. It was 1,000 contradictions bound together by tide and trade. It was freedom and oppression, law and lawlessness, luxury and disease, dreams and despair carried upon the same breeze. For the pirates, life was short, uncertain, and wild. For the governors, heavy with duty and drink. And for everyone in between, the sailor, the smuggler, the enslaved, the sea was both a giver and a taker. And yet, in the quiet of this moment, long after the cannon smoke has cleared, there is something almost soothing in their world. A rhythm, a tide. The kind of rhythm that rocked old ships gently to sleep. The kind of rhythm that hums beneath every historical trace, if you listen closely enough. So wherever you are now, perhaps tucked under covers, perhaps already halfway to dreaming, know this. The world you've just visited still lingers in weathered maps, in forgotten ledgers, in the bones of ships buried under centuries of coral and time. And whenever you wish to return, you need only close your eyes and listen for the tide. Thank you for joining me. Sleep well, and may your dreams drift gently through history.